If you're new to who I am, I'm Alan Robertson. I'm Executive Director at ASDWA. I started in January last year, so this is my second DMUC, and it's grown quite a bit, so I apologize for the kind of tight conditions we have in this room. We'll ensure that next year we'll have slightly larger facilities. I don't imagine the interest is going to decline in 2019 and 2020 as we transition. So I have a pretty simple presentation with no slides. So I'm going to use my hand signals in deference to Anita. I got 3 things to talk about. One is really just to thank everybody for coming. Everyone that I talk to that works at a state organization is very busy. So taking the time out and spending a week here, and we have several other people that then volunteer on our work groups and committees, the UAT team and others, Rachel, Patty, and a whole cadre of folks that provide a lot of what I call volunteer time and expertise that I don't have and I don't need to have, and frankly don't want to have if I don't have to. So I don't think I'm going to be a user of Sidwest Prime ever. My job is to make sure that it works for the 57 members of ASDWA plus the 10 EPA regions. I don't want to forget about them. So they have an important role. And so how that transition works in the next 2.5 years is pretty important from my point of view. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to take advantage of the opportunities to talk to your peers. So as we sort of, it gets rolled out, and as we move forward with the completing the development of Prime and the transition, there's going to be a lot of issues that are going to have to be solved, I think, between the states. So take advantage of the networking opportunities on the breaks and at lunch. And then we may find down the road that we'll be able to share pieces of code, interfacing applications. Good example, Indiana and Drinking Water Watch. A lot of states have picked that up. There may be other updated versions of that or other tools for tracking sanitary surveys or operator certification or other components of running the program where we can trade. And I think there are going to be a lot of long-term solutions that we're going to have to work on. And then third, just I guess the term I'm trying to use is kind of be patient. So I know some of my compadres in the gym this morning. So I saw both Michael and Anita. So does anyone here like go to a gym or like go ride their bike or something, like do any kind of real physical exercise? Come on, I know some people out there do that. So there's a point when you do a workout, and it's usually for me about a quarter or a third into it, where I go, why am I doing this? You know, because you start getting tired right away, and you know you're not that close to the end of it. And so that's kind of where I think we are today with Sidwest Prime, that you know we're just sort of maybe a third of the way into it, and you kind of get discouraged and wonder, you know, why am I doing this? And in this case, it's because we have to, but that's a different. So, you know, be patient and look at this. This is going to be a 2 or 3 year process, and there's going to be some bumps in the roads, and I'm going to do what I can to be patient. So not my strong suit for people that have worked with me in the past, but I think then everyone here in the audience and the people that are on the webinars need to think about how we're going to do this and how we're going to get to the end point, which is somewhere down the road. We've got, again, the 57 ASWA members in the 10 regions using this new software that is a significant change from what we've done in the past. And I think it will make some of the business processes more efficient. We can provide, you know, better service to the water systems and then ultimately to the customers to continue to provide safe water. So with that, I will close and turn it over to Marie from Utah DEQ.
Thank you, Alan. I probably will never use Sidwest Prime either. I don't think Rachel will let me touch it. When I came, it was the director just didn't have any access to the data at all, and Rachel and I talked about that, and somewhere in that discussion, I just never got access to the database, and that's okay. I like to pretend that that's because I am looking at the data from the public's perspective and from the water system's perspective. But it really could be that my staff doesn't trust me, which is all right. As you can see that they're serious about their data and the transition and what they do with that. And so unexperienced hands really should not be meddling with that, and I'm unexperienced hands. But I am totally vested in this process and what data does for us. And my predecessor agreed to with Patty and Rachel and all of our staff that we were going to be all in on SID/WIS Prime and CMDP. And I am completely supportive of that stance and the process that we're going through. So we have jumped into this pool of water with no life vests. We are all in, and we are working to make sure that that works. And hopefully you saw that and had a good experience yesterday as you heard kind of what our experience was. So just briefly, I want to welcome you all to Utah. How many people, is this your very first time you've been to Utah? That is great. That is wonderful. So I want to give you just a few stats about Utah, just in case you didn't know. This is the site of the completion of the first transcontinental railroad. So the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific were racing to get across. We aren't in the center, so you can kind of tell that one versus the other, but the connection point where we had one complete railroad is in Utah. Utah is the site of the very first department store. We do like to shop in Utah. It was Zion's Cooperative Mercantile. It started in the 1980s, and it is still in operation today. You can go downtown and go to ZCMI, very first department store. 1800s, yes, sorry. Thank you. See, this is why they don't let me touch the data. Rainbow Bridge down in our Canyonlands is nature's largest span of natural rock, and it spans 278 feet and is 309 feet high. Utah's mountain peaks, if you average all of our highest peaks in all of our ranges, we have the tallest average of the entire country. So there are other mountain peaks that are higher than ours, but if you average all of our tallest peaks, we have over 11,000 feet. So if you're having a hard time breathing, there is a reason for that. We are at high altitude. Rachel's not going to take you on a very high hike this afternoon, though. The Utah has 5 national parks and 7 national monuments. Utah we are the 11th largest state, and we have close to 85,000 square miles, but 2/3 of that is owned by the national government. So our national parks, our national forests, and national monuments, the federal government owns 2/3 of our state. Inland. Kanab is known as Utah's Little Hollywood. We have had over 100 movies and TV shows that were filmed in Kanab. So that's a consistent industry for us. If pretty much most of the Old West movies that you have seen were filmed in Utah. And so we often watch a bunch of shows and recognize things like in Pirates of the Caribbean, the Dead Man's area, that was the Salt Flats. So anyway, we recognize a lot of landmarks in movies. The Great Salt Lake is about 45 miles long, 35 miles wide, and covers more than 1 million acres. So as you kind of think through all of those statistics, we've got a lot of land, but not a lot of it is usable. And we are one of the most sparsely populated states in the nation. We congregate along the Wasatch Front, and then The rest of the state is very sparsely populated. Those who live in those sparse areas love it. They don't actually like interacting with people, and really do not like government oversight. So that's part of what we are and who we are in Utah. Today I wanted to just talk about watershed moments. All of you will know what a watershed is. Just an area where the water all congregates together, small up at the top of the watershed, and then it builds as it goes down, and all comes together. So the term a watershed moment, for those of you who aren't familiar, is a specific event in time that continues to build until the world around it is fundamentally changed. It's a turning point or a delineation where events proceed in a completely different direction and cannot be called back. So some of the examples of that were the invention of the steam engine. Once the steam engine was invented, it allowed for manufacturing. Manufacturing allowed for cities and communities to be built. Once the steam engine was invented, it fundamentally changed the world, never to go back. The Great Depression was a watershed moment. That event changed our economic system. It created social nets. It created the New Deal, where we had infrastructure. That one event in time changed the course of events, never to go back. Space travel was one of those, where it drove technology and created tools for us. The thalidomide babies was a point in time in the 1960s that fundamentally changed how we view what interacting with the environment does to our species. So up until that point, there was really no understanding or concern about what chemicals in the environment would do to our bodies. And so that was a watershed moment that turned our perception of our environment around us. The computer revolution, once Microsoft or a Macintosh computer was built, we have never gone back. We all carry computers in our pockets, in our hands. That was the watershed moment that drove us to the point of the internet and cell phones and social media. 9/11 was a watershed moment. It changed how we interact with the world. It changed how we feel with vulnerability and our security systems and all of those things. It was a watershed moment. We'll never be able to undo the impact that 9/11 had on our country. And Flint, Michigan is a watershed moment. The impact that Flint, Michigan had on our industry can never be undone. And we are entering an era that we're going to have to transition to. As much as we would love the impacts to have not happened, we just can't go back. We can't push water uphill. So there's a spiral that we can get caught in. Flint, Michigan created a public health crisis that was well known, well publicized. That created a loss of trust from the public. It landed the government as the enemy. Flint, Michigan was the situation where the public felt like the government was withholding information from them and not fully explaining the impacts that they had, and intentionally trying to create a situation that may have health impacts. So you can't push this well back the other direction. Once that is the case, the public wants all the data. They don't trust the government. They don't trust the public water systems. They want the information themselves to decide, because they felt like they did not get the true story or quick enough. Once the public wants all of that data, it's too much data. They don't know what to do with it. It's an overload. The data overload creates fear and anxiety. The fear and anxiety then lead us to start making reactions rather than decisions based on that data, Once you're making reactions, you have unintended consequences, then you get another public health crisis, and the cycle just keeps spinning and increasing in speed. And so this is the reality that we're in. We are in this cycle, and the only way to break out of that is to pull out on the data overload and give context to our data. The public is already to the point that they're requiring all of that data. We cannot withhold that from them. They no longer have any patience for, we need to collect that data and spend a few years scrubbing it, making sure, taking all of the anomalies out, and making sure that we're giving you good, clean data. There's no patience for it anymore. But the only way we can break that cycle is to start to give context quicker and in the method that they want. So how do we deliver this data? First of all, the data has to be accurate and complete. Now, we don't have the luxury of waiting for all of the data to come in before we start to communicate. But what data we have, we need to go to all the efforts that we can to make sure that it is accurate as quickly as possible and that we're capturing as much of the data for a complete picture as we can. After that, we have to box it up. They don't actually want numbers. Nobody wants numbers. Well, you guys want numbers, but most of the public does not want numbers. They want it boxed up and packaged in a way that gives context, and tells a story. And then we have to put a little pretty bow on it and make it into an infographic or a video or a Facebook post or an Instagram. They want it packaged up and pretty. If they get it rough, then the perception is that we are trying to be disingenuous in communicating that information to them. And then how do we get it to them? So how do we deliver it to them in a timely way? They want to know quickly, more quickly than we typically feel comfortable communicating that. And it needs to be in the route of information that they're getting information now. So Alan and I were talking yesterday, very few people take the paper. So putting ads in the paper, does that help? Does it not? How is that information getting out to them? It is no longer enough for us to say it's available. If the public doesn't feel like they have been spoon-fed that information, they're going to feel like we didn't give it to them. And this is the reality that we're in now. So I've kind of borrowed the 90-10 principle. It's a principle that was coined by Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits, but I'm using it differently here. For us to be able to spend the amount of time that we need to package things up and make them pretty and put bows on them and create infographics, that's a lot of time and effort for us. So we are focused in Utah on 90% of the data, just taking 10% of our time. So we are trying to build a data autobahn where the vast majority of the data can just go on this road. We're going to make sure that the road is paved well, that there are no obstacles, and that data can just scream down that road as quickly as it can. 90% of the data is data that comes in compliant. It shows that the water system is in compliance and it can just move down that road. We don't have to touch it. We don't have to look at it. We don't have to spend all of our time logging it in and manipulating it and looking at it. We're going to let computers do what computers do best, which is transfer numbers. And then we're going to look for that 10% of the data that does need attention. And we're going to pull that off to an off-ramp. We're going to pull that off the Autobahn, and we're going to spend 90% of our effort looking at that 10% of the data that needs some attention. And we're going to spend people making decisions on 10% of the data, and we're going to let 90% of that data just cruise on down the Autobahn. So those are the tools that we've invested in, and that's the strategy that we are working with within Utah. So just kind of some statistics to give you a feel of our state and what we're working with within the drinking water. We have, let's see, oh, I was just wondering if I could get a little pointer. Anyway, this little graph. Oh, I'll just point right there. Okay. This graph right here just shows what the demographics of our water systems are. So nearly just over half of our water systems are transient or non-transient, non-community water systems. It is only this section right here that is community water systems. Of this section, nearly half of our community water systems are less than 500 in the population. So half are transient or non-transient, non-community. Of the other half are less than 500 in population. Again, we have a lot of really sparse populated communities, and they do not like to be regulated. The other quarter are the vast majority of 250 water systems that service pretty much all of our population statewide. So we have a lot of small systems that we're working with. Some of the challenges that we are facing, the graph on the left shows the increase in the number of public water systems that Utah has experienced over the last decade or so. So we are up over 1,000 water systems now, and we can expect this trend to continue. In fact, as we start looking at kind of taking away some of the blind spots that we've had in the public water system definition, we expect this number to go up even higher. But we're not getting any more resources. The pie chart on the right shows our funding picture for Utah. Nearly 75% of our funding comes from federal dollars. 22% comes from state appropriations. We only have about 4% of our funds that are coming from fees. So we've got some room that we could work with to try to build that funding, but we have ever increasing demands on our time and our resources, and the likelihood of getting that funding to increase proportional to that is non-existent. And all of you are facing the same thing within your own states. So we have to figure out how to get more and more cars and data packages onto our Autobahn and have less and less of the ones that we're spending time with, because that's how we're going to be able to manage our capacity. So our program, we've got about 40 to 45 people in our program, depending on how many vacancies we have at the given time. We have rural managers. We have 10 rural managers on our staff. We have 12 review engineers and scientists that look at plans and infrastructure that's coming through this system. We have 4 people that are dedicated to funding assistance. We have 2 people that work primarily on backflow and operator certification. We have 4 emergency and technical assistance providers. And we also rely very heavily on rural water to help us out in the remote areas of the state. We have 4 employees that do management policy and outreach. We have 5 office support. Our programmers are within our state. We have a DTS section, and we are to use them. We cannot have an on-staff programmer. There's a pool that we work through. There are some pros and cons to that. We have found that one of the critical pieces is to work really closely with the state DTS division to help them understand what our needs are and help them understand how critical these projects are that we're working on. And so giving them the context and helping them out is critical, because these aren't staff that are internal to our program. And data managers, we share that between all of the other jobs. So we don't have people that are solely dedicated to the data management. It primarily comes from our rural managers, because they're using the data the most heavily. But everything that you saw yesterday with our staff, they all have other jobs besides what you saw them doing yesterday. And so we struggle with that a little bit. And data is critical to us, so we could, that would be great if we had people that were just dedicated to data, but we don't have that luxury. So just kind of to close up, part of what we're working on is to connect the data to the public health impacts. Just 3 examples that I have. One, we historically have not been great about looking at our MRDLs, our disinfection residuals. We started doing that a year or 2 ago, and when we really pull that data in and look and try to connect it to the public health impact, we recognize that we have several systems in Utah that are batch chlorinating. Some of that may be intentional, some of it just may be a lack of understanding, but chlorinating and then not chlorinating, chlorinating and not chlorinating creates a public health impact. And so looking at the data helped us to recognize that and know where to focus our efforts. In Utah, we spent a considerable amount of effort to collect lead in schools data in 2017. We actually got data from nearly 80% of the schools around the state, and that data showed us that we really do have occurrences in schools where lead is higher than the lead and copper rule data would have indicated from the water systems. That directly led to mitigation in those schools and dropped the exposure level to thousands of students around the state just by a one-time effort to go out and collect data. The other example that we are struggling with in Utah is water use data. We have a lot of water systems that don't even meter, and so they don't understand how much water is being used, how much water is needed to supply their system. And so in Utah, there's a huge push over the last few years, and we are involved in this, to have the water systems collecting that data in a better way, have that data more accurate, and then use that for sizing the system so that these systems don't run into capacity problems on their peak day or during high demand. So we are going to be constantly balancing this desire for full transparency. The public thinks they want full transparency. But if we just give them the data, straight up raw data, and dilute them with everything we have, then we're also subject to the criticism that we are just trying to create fear, that we are trying to chase things that aren't really a problem. And that balance between transparency and fear-mongering is going to be a difficult balance that we're going to have to find. And all of that is going to have to go through the route of what the public wants to see. So they don't want to go look at a report. They don't want to pull up a website that is confusing and doesn't just quickly point out the items that they have. The public is rapidly coming to having a 2.5-minute attention span. And if we can't send the message in 2.5 minutes, we've lost them. And not only does the message not come across, but the message that they will make up on their own can be damaging to our industry. So I applaud everything that you are doing. I know that these are difficult challenges that will come up. I hear that this is a significantly larger attendance. I'd like to think it's just because Utah is amazing and you all wanted to come. It could have something to do with CMDP and Prime. But I want to welcome you all here. If you have any questions, please reach out to, we've got several Utah people here. If you have questions about the area, let them know. If you have questions about what we're doing, please ask them. We are fully vested in this transition, and welcome to Utah.
Thank you, Marie. Okay, next up, we're going to hear from Anita Tompkins from EPA. She's going to give us the OGW DW perspective. And you're all set, Anita.
I guess I'm a little shorter.
Well, good morning, and thanks, Marie, for that great introduction and also just a good perspective of what is going on in Utah and some of the challenges you're facing. So, good morning and welcome, everyone. I am glad to be here, and I'm actually glad you guys are here as well. As Alan had told me probably about a month, maybe back in May, saying that this was going to be a lot larger attendance at this DMUC session. And I was like, yeah, everybody's so excited about Prime and CMDP and Utah. Marie and your folks, thank you for being all in. And it's okay that you don't have a life vest. We all float pretty well, right? We can get on our backs. So before I get started with my opening remarks, because we have a lot to talk about, I want to take this time to give out some big thank yous, some big shout outs. I want to give a big shout out to the ASWA for hosting this conference. You know, Alan, Daryl, Anthony, and Tom, thank you so much for your dedication, your continued support to keep moving us forward. So I really appreciate that. And I also want to give a big shout out to Utah. To everything that you have done. Marie, you being the director and allowing Patty to continue doing that IPA with us, and then all the folks in Utah that actually helped and host and getting this conference together. And I just want to go over your, recognize you via name, and if you want to stand up after I call everybody and everybody can give them a round of applause, that'd be great. So let me go through. It's a lot of people, so hold your applause. So from logistics and dealing with presentations and also the prime testing and the work that was done yesterday, there's a group of 7 folks that I want to give some shout outs to. Rachel Cassidy, Colt Smith, Dalen Frank, Jennifer Yee, Satara Frederica, Emily Nettles, and Brandy Smith. And then for the rest of the rules staff in Utah, Matt Wyckoff, Janet Lee, Randy Ryan, Michelle Davis, and Tammy Allen. So if you're here, stand up, and then everybody look around, give them a big round of applause. All in the back row. Okay, great. So now we'll actually get into my presentation and really my overview of what we want to talk about this time. Lots of discussion. So this is basically an outline of what I'm going to be discussing. I'm going to talk about some highlights since our last year's DMUC session that was back in Cincinnati in May of 2017. Wow, it's already been a little bit over a year. And then I want to talk about our development approach in transitioning to our pilot phase and to our implementation phase. And then what is the September 2018 release, right? We can talk about that, as well as our development roadmap for it was the pilot phase as well as the implementation phase. And then also to talk about the pilot phase highlights. You probably got some emails maybe last week or the week before from Alan from ASWA as well as from Michael Plastino from EPA for a new call, and we'll talk about that, what that really means. So without further ado, let's just jump right on in. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, right? Okay, so I actually took out my speech from last year to go because we were in Cincinnati, and that's when we were talking about having the version 0.8 of Prime coming out that fall, and I said a lot of things at the podium. So I want to kind of go back there. So I want to go from the past, and then we're going to where we are right now. So about a year ago at the last DMUC, I actually got the speech, we're moving full speed ahead with CMDP transition. Because back then, in March of 2017, we almost doubled our funding to support transitioning to CMDP. So that was a big deal back in March of 2017. And at that time, and still continues, Attain has been working really hard, utilizing this funding to ramp up the additional support to help states transition. So where we are now, which is great, we have increased from 3 to 8 primacy agencies using CMDP in production. And we expect 3 more expected over the next 2 to 3 months. So you might be asking, what are those 8 primacy agencies? Well, I got them for you. We got Arkansas, Arizona, Connecticut, Louisiana, Montana, North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Utah. So I applaud all of these primacy agencies that have taken the leap over to CMDP. We don't need life rafts. We're swimming very well in this water. CMDP has been in production for about 2 years. October 2016 is when we actually launched it. So we've learned a lot of lessons. We had some, I call them speed bumps, maybe some potholes, and axles didn't get broken too bad, but we were able to ride that wave. And now we have a good system of how we can move forward with transitioning the primacy agencies. Okay, then also a year ago, I said we were moving full speed ahead with SIDWIS Prime development. A year ago, I said that the version 0.8 was going to be released in production testing was going to be released in September 2017, and that we were going to have 3 rounds of community testing, and that the version 1.0 was going to be released around March of 2018 with additional rounds of community testings. Well, I know that we did hit some speed bumps when that happened. I think everybody's aware of that. I call it the big speed bump. I call it, as we say in the office at EPA headquarters, we hit the speed bump. We went airborne. We flipped over and we slid a little bit. But we landed. We had seatbelts on, so we were safe, right? A little upside down, but we figured out. So we learned some things. We learned some things, and some of the things that we did learn was some issues dealing with NCC, the National Computing Center with EPA. We also learned some issues dealing with data migration, and we also learned some challenges with the BRE and the UI integration. So, as I always say, in order to move forward, you got to learn lessons, and sometimes you have some, I call them little failures, but you learn from that and you can move forward. So with all that said, we scrambled, figured out things, worked with the TANE, worked with NCC, worked with you guys, and said, okay, we need to halt what we're doing so we can examine what happened and figure out how to move forward. So we were able to release that Prime version 0.8 back in January. And from there, we were able to do the community testing. We had 250 users in the 4 primacy agencies doing that testing from January to March of this year. And now we're moving forward to that September 2018 release. So, but the lessons that we learned from what happened with the September version 0.8 release, those were pivotal lessons because it made us look at how do we move forward? What are some things can we move forward? Is there a different approach that we need to look at in order to move forward so this doesn't happen again? Right. And then also I said a year ago that we were going to be moving full speed ahead with interface application data exchange solutions. And that back in the summer of 2017, we were able to define that vision for that with using the API web services and the virtual exchange services, and that we plan to deliver some solutions to that with our March, with the Prime delivery back in September. I did say last year at the DMUC, we were going to be doing that release back in March when our final version 1.0 was supposed to be released in March, but it got pushed back to September. But what I can say now, we're in progress. We're going to have that happen. We have Virginia and Utah that are actually piloting the virtual exchange services and that virtual exchange services system. So we are thankful for these folks that are the trailblazers. I call them the iPhone, I'd say 10 and a half users, because we're going into, there's some things we know and some things we don't know. So they're willing to go out there and help us navigate those waters. So we appreciate that. So now this is talking about the modular approach. I think everybody's very familiar with how we were doing the modular approach, that we were going to be building out these particular modules, whether it's violations, monitoring schedules, sampling points, scheduled activities, and then we're going to use that to see how we build out the BRE. And from the lessons we learned about what happened on the version 0.8 release, and we had some hiccups, we learned that that approach is just going to take so much longer to do. We also understood that it came very clear that at the past ASWA conference back in March of 2018, that SIDWA state was breaking down. So we needed to move quickly to make sure that that wasn't going to be a stumbling block. So we changed the approach to look at how do we get the SIDWA state, because of its increasing instability, how can we get prime out sooner? And that's when we came out with the BRE test case approach. And this is just kind of giving you where we were and what we were doing before. Good. So now, moving on. So in April, working with the UAT, we gathered some test cases from the UAT group. In April of this past year, we changed from that modular approach to focus on the test cases, as I said earlier. And what we understood was that we wanted the BRE needs to, we were focusing on what the BRE needs to do for supporting the remaining rules, and then develop that functionality in the UI to support what the BRE needs to do. As we know, the BRE, as I call it, the artificial intelligence, it's the brain of that system. It actually helps, does the activity, what kind of activities need to be evaluated. It determines the monitoring schedule. It also determines monitoring and M&R compliance. It does a lot. So our focus was going to be on how do we get through the entire system without looking at these very modular approach. And when we do that, we're going to understand that the system is working the way it should be, giving you the information that you need. So that's how we did that. We'll have more technical details on that in our 10:30 session today, as well as our 1:30 p.m. session today. The UAT group is going to be doing some demos, so you guys can get some hands-on experience with that and see how that's all going to work. So we appreciate all you guys, so excited, and that's why you're here, to get all this demos and this. I call this a working meeting. And sometimes I'm a person that needs to be able to. I'm a hands-on person. So sometimes things are in theory, don't work for me. I need to actually experience it. And that's why we wanted this conference to be more of a demo and hands-on, so everybody can experience what is going to be coming soon to them. So with that said, so also in April, we determined that we needed to understand we knew what we needed, APIs, but we actually needed to make sure that these internal Prime UI APIs were going to be accessible externally. There's a lot of there's a lot of challenges working in NCC and how we have to make sure the data is protected. So we need to make sure these APIs can go back and forth between your state, your SIDWA state, and your local data repositories, as well as to the Prime and what's in NCC. So we focused on, okay, we need to make sure that can happen as well. So in April, there was because of what we learned, and also because of the comments we got from the community testing and from the UAT group, we were able to make some decisions on how we were going to move forward in order to get Prime delivery to you sooner rather than later. Good. All right. So this slide here is basically summarizing exactly what I said. So this evolved approach is focusing on the BRE test cases, allows us to focus on implementing Prime early, which we want to do. And it also provides you guys greater flexibility for your utilization, because it enables you, the state, to actually customize what your individual needs might be. As far as that UI. And I think Patty, folks that were in CMDP yesterday or have been working with Patty and all the UAT group, and understands that, what we've been doing with that. So we appreciate that. All right, the big thing. What is going to be released in September 2018, right? This is what everybody wants to hear about. So in the September 2018 release, these are your 5 components. CMDP has already been there, but we wanted to include that because that's all part of this SIDWIS Prime modernization. We broke it down into 2 parts for our SIDWIS modernization. Part 1 was CMDP, and part 2 is what we call Prime, and it's all underneath the umbrella of SIDWIS modernization. So CMDP, as I said earlier, we have 8 states that have been in production. back in April, when we made this evolved approach so we could get Prime out sooner, we actually had to shift some funding from CMDP to Prime. So you might have noticed that our folks working on CMDP, we didn't have it was a little slower getting states to transition on that because we had to maximize all our resources to work on Prime so we could get that September release out. After our September release in October, our funding will go back to normal funding levels for CMDP so we can start moving forward in that direction as well. The BRE, the Business Rules Engine, it's the guts. You'll see lots of demos of these 31 case studies over the next 2 sessions, and what's going to be delivered is that BRE with all the rules except the surface water treatment rule. That'll come out in another release, and I'll talk about our roadmap from there. APIs. Everybody's where are the APIs? There will be a demo tomorrow, and for the September release, there'll be one API that's going to be released, and that's really API focus on samples data upload. The demo tomorrow will be with our Office of Environmental Information. Andrew and Michelle will be doing that session tomorrow. Then the VES, the Virtual Exchange Network. That's going to also be part of our release in September. And there's going to be demos tomorrow so people can see what it looks like, how it works. And then Virginia and Utah will be are here so you can have conversations with them since they are the pilot. And we have Justin and folks from Syselex that'll be doing that demo for you guys tomorrow. And then the big thing that's also part of the release in September is the Prime user interface. You'll see lots of BRE test cases demos throughout the next 2 days. Patty plus several of the folks from the UAT group members will be leading these demos for you guys. So those are the components that are going to be released. Now you're going to probably be asking, what's the time frame? Well, here we go. Here's our roadmap. Okay, so this roadmap is telling you where we are, and where we want to and where we're going. So right now we're in July, right? You see that's at that bottom. That's your right. Yeah, right. Okay, that's your right. Bottom right is the July, and that's where we are now. We're at the DMUC. We're doing all these demos, so you can have experience with that. As we said, September, we're going to have that release, and it's going to be the 31 test cases for the BRE. We're going to have the common user UI that's going to be released, as well as the one API that I talked about, and that's the sample data's upload. Then we're going to start with that September release, we're going to start the part of the pilot phase, and I'll talk about that request the next slide. And we anticipate having another release in the January 2019 timeframe. It could be December, but I rather err for being January. And if we get you in December, that means we were really successful. So that's going to be another release, and that's going to have the some additional BREs dealing with their surface water treatment rule, some additional APIs, the open source part of the UI for those modules like enforcement, system administration, and the dashboards that wasn't going to be complete by the September release, and some other things that were going to be there. So we're going to have this January release, and then we're going to also have another March release to ensure that we get additional APIs or other functionality to the system. And at that point, around that March timeframe, the system is going to be able to be adoptable, and we're looking for states that want to volunteer to be part of this pilot phase. We know it's going to be a dynamic process, okay, in this pilot phase. So as I call it, be flexible, be agile, be all type of you're the trailblazers working with us through this pilot phase that's going to begin right around that October timeframe. Our goal is that maybe a few states, like maybe Utah or maybe Idaho, could be. So yeah, one of several states would be able to adopt and start working with the whole system come the March time of 2019 timeframe. So you see at the end of that, it says March 2020, sit with state retirement. And what that means, I think we've been very clear about that, is that EPA will no longer support Sidwith State as far as anything that needs to be upgraded or things of that nature. If this timeline changes because maybe we hit another speed bump or pothole, then that'll be extended out. Okay, but that's where we're looking at right now. It's as we say, it's IT. IT has and it's IT in the federal government. There's always little loopholes and things that come up unexpectedly, and we just have to be very agile and very flexible as that happens. But this gives you a roadmap of what we're looking at. So then that takes us to my last slide, and that's about the pilot phase, as well as the request that came out that I talked about earlier. There was the email that came from Alan from ASWA, as well as one from Michael, asking for states to which states the request for nominees for primacy agencies that want to volunteer for this pilot phase. And we're asking this, I know we had about a year ago, we did have those states that did volunteer, but now we're saying we're going to ask it again. And if you are one of the states that was volunteered a year ago and you still want to volunteer, that is great. But things have changed, and and because we're going to be going through this dynamic process from this October to this March timeframe, we want to give people an opportunity, whether they want to back out or they want to say, no, I'm all in. I want to jump in with both feet, and we're going to make this happen, and we're going to explore together. We want to give people that states that opportunity. So, work with your directors, your folks, and see if you want to nominate your state. We're looking for 5 to 6 states and 1 EPA region to participate in this pilot phase. So it gives us an opportunity for that. And then some of you might be thinking, well, suppose I don't want to be in the pilot phase. Am I just left out? No, don't you worry. You will never be left out. But you will have the opportunity to explore Prime during the pilot phase. So basically, you'll be able to look at this opportunity will help you better understand what you need for transition, and you'll be able to look at the system. I call it, I'd say explore with the system, but whatever, where we're not going to focus on your particular feedback. We're going to be focusing really on the feedback from the folks that are really in the pilot phase. So you'll still have that opportunity if you're not in the pilot phase. Michael will be talking more about that at the 3:30 p.m. session today. So there you have it. So as you can see, the last part of this slide is talking about what our priorities are during the pilot phase, and that's really to complete the BRE, which I talked about earlier. We want to deliver the remaining UI functional areas, as I talked about earlier, the system admin, enforcement, and dashboards. And then we want to continue the acceleration of the APIs, not just from the data system upload, but also from talking from your Sidwith State to Prime down at NCC, and also the APIs that work with your interfacing applications. We know that's all part of the bundle. So with all that said, I'm excited about the upcoming year. I think we are staying on as best track as we can to keep moving forward. As I always say, tell folks, how do you eat an elephant? One slice at a time. We've been dealing with Sidwith's modernization, I would say, for about 9 years now. And now we got CMDP out. We have the 0.8 version. We have the September release. We're moving forward in incremental steps, and with your help and your support to make sure that we can have the data that we need, that Marie talked about so in her talk earlier, that the data that we need to make sure that we're doing our very best for public health protection. So with all that said, I want to thank you guys. We're excited. We're looking forward to all you folks that are going to be volunteering to be in that pilot phase. We're going to be running down our doors for that. Lots of emails flying back and forth. We're looking forward to that, and thank you very much. So any questions? I'm sure you have lots of questions. Sure. Is that okay? Okay, yeah. Okay, good.
Barry Brown, North Dakota. I'll lead off the skepticism.
That's appreciated. Thank you.
I hate to say it, but we've over the course of this project, you mentioned 9 years. Multiple times we've heard 9 months out, we'll be done with development. How is this one going to be different?
A great question. And this one is different because we actually, back in October 2016, we got CNDP out, like we said. We started transitioning that. September of 2017, we had a little bump, but we got the 0.8 version out for Prime. We got successful with that. We got your comments for the user from the community, all the community testing. We have the September release. How is it going to be different is because we're taking one small section at a time to see how that goes and releasing that. That's why it's going to be different. I think way back in the day, I think our focus was trying to get everything out at one time instead of taking one, as I said, taking one slice at a time to see how we move forward. So that's how it's going to be different. I hope that answered your question. And because I think we've shown some success in the last couple of years for what we're moving forward.
I do agree there's been definite success over the last year. However, when I look at the amount of work that I perceive is yet to be done, I question whether or not it can be done in 9 months. I hope it can. Don't get me wrong. And I'll do what I can, but that timeline makes me nervous again because it seems overly optimistic.
Thank you. And we are. I thank you for that comment. We have increased, as I said, we deferred some funding from CMDP, and we actually increased our funding for Prime so we could focus on moving this forward by $100,000 a month. So right now we're spending a little bit over $400,000 a month to make sure we can get make these goals that we have set, and working with Attain as well as our PMO to make sure we do that. Thank you.
Hi, Shirley Malachek with Region 8. I've got a couple of questions. You answered one of them with that, but one of the questions I have is with the testing we did, we found out that there was no manual data entry capabilities. Is that going to be available during the pilot testing? That's one question. And the second question is, and as a regional coordinator, we have not even heard about how are we going to do reporting? How is the data going to get from Prime to the Fed Prime, or whatever it's going to be called?
Right. So to answer your first question, yes, we will have the ability. You will have the ability to manually upload the data. To answer your first question, and then to answer your second question, and that's going to be with an API. And you're talking about the interface applications. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking how the state's data gets from their owned data system to the federal data system.
Right. And my understanding is that there is going to be an API that's going to be able to do that. There'll be more technical for that kind of technical specifics. I'm not exactly sure. I would rather you wait till we have the technical demos and you can ask the technical folks how to do that. But from my understanding, there is going to be a way to do that.
I hope so.
Oh, yeah, of course. There has to be. I mean, there has to be, you know.
I've been asking about it since you guys started doing this, and nobody's been able to answer the coordinator's questions on how it's going to do them and what's going on.
This afternoon, we have all the demos set up to answer all those questions. It's a fundamental thing. I know it's part of the process, but if you're going to ask me technically how we're going to do it, I can't answer that.
I just want to make sure that has even been addressed.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That has totally been addressed. We're pardoned for not someone responding to you with that, but that has been addressed. Yes, thank you.
Hi, Anita. Damon Gutterman from Massachusetts. So I guess from my perspective, it'd be helpful to hear how a test case approach to the BRE development does or does not differ from expectations that if a rule's been introduced into the BRE, it includes everything that was in those baseline flow charts that wrapped around all your staff cubicles several years ago. So when you say that the September release will have everything except surface water treatment rule, I assume that means all the iterations of that rule. But for like LCR, it'll cover water quality parameter reviews and those kind of things. I don't mean the differences between how a state might be more stringent or do things that are beyond the federal rule, but if a rule is covered under 40 CFR 141 and it's in the BRE, all the aspects are in the BRE.
all the aspects will be in the VRE. But as I said, remember when you looked at some of the certain portions of the UI was not going to be built out till during that pilot phase. So we still have the dashboard, we have the enforcement and the systems admin. That's going to be built out during that pilot phase.
I recognize that. I guess my
Okay.
concern is 31 test cases doesn't cover all the compliance decisions we have to make in every rule.
Correct. You're absolutely
So
correct.
what's missing from those rules, I guess, is the delta I'd like to see a little more about.
Okay. Yeah, we can share that with you. I know that we're going to be, I think that's at one of our demos tomorrow, but we can actually share that with you. I understand what you're saying. Yes.
Hi, Anita. Joe Carlson from Oregon. One of the questions that I have is it appears that Prime will only be partially built in March if I was following your slides, such as surface water treatment rule. Did I misunderstand that aspect?
Can you repeat your question? It's going to, when the September release, we won't have the surface water treatment rule there, but during that October through March, we're going to have that release, as I said, in January 2019, and that's when we'll have the surface water treatment rule. The rest of the UI for the with the different dashboard system admin enforcement will be released during that.
So it'll be a complete release by March of 19.
March of 19, it will be a complete release. But remember, complete is probably from some people's perspective different.
Well, what I'm looking at is we don't have to run Sidwith State to do part of our work and Prime to do part of our work.
Well, okay. Yeah. So let me clarify what you're be right. Clear here. So the system in March, some states will adopt it. They'll feel that whatever the UI is, that common UI that they can use for a go to publication, that they can work with that. Other states might say, I want to customize that. I want some more requirements on that UI. So then they might not want to adopt right then and there because they want to add some customization to that. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
So if it's going to be a system that on its base, unless you want to do customization, is adoptable.
Yes.
And we don't need to be able to have to do our work partially in Sidwith State. If we want additional things because we have additional requirements, we'll have the flexibility to be able to add those and then adopt.
Correct. And then you still got to do your virtual exchange services, all the other the pieces right. that you need to do to help your state transition to Prime. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Patrick Southern from Vermont. I'm curious, what is the mechanism to customize the UI following that March release?
Right. And so right now we're looking at trying to get a third-party vendor for that mechanism. And we're actually right now starting to formulate some ideas on how to do that. But our first thing is to have like a third-party vendor to give them to publicize the code for that. We'll know more as we get further along, but thank you.
This is Buddy Souza, Region 1. This might be an addendum to what Shirley was talking about, but up until the point where Prime is fully implemented, how is the data from Sidwith State, from the states, and from Sidwith Prime all going to be, and maybe we're going to talk about this in the next couple of days, but how that's all going to be together in one place where we can pull the data and look at the data and do what we're doing now.
Right. So as what we did with CMDP, there was all that the data migration that's going to have to, okay, let's go back. I'm going to take off CMDP for a second. Remember when we had the version 0.8 and we uploaded a bunch of data, maybe 5 years worth of data from the states so you guys could explore with that. And we had some issues with that data upload from NCC. So what we are doing now, and Renee Morris is actually working in the back to help get that to work on how do we migrate a lot of the data that's in the warehouse and then also from Sidwith State into the prime system. So we're already working on that and on the back side, and Renee's working with Systilex and things with that nature. If you want more of I know we're doing it, so if you want more of the technical details or how we're doing it, I would say, Renee, raise your hand so people know. Please, please go talk to Renee, because we learned a lot of lessons from that data migration and upload that happened with that version 0.8 release. So that's why we're doing this now. So thank you.
I think I can talk loud enough. I think what Buddy's asking. I think what Buddy's also asking, and what I was also asking, is we're not going to have all states going to prime.
Correct.
Not all states are going to go CMDP.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to get the SID with states and the prime states and all of that data? Because right now, FedRep, is it still going to go the same way, or is that just a technical talk next week or next tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm going to let Michael answer that because it's more technical.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to continue to have the FedRep process for the next several years. So any state that's currently using SID with state over the next few years, they'll still be SID with FedRep, or any other system they're using that's non-SID with state. That data will go into the warehouse and the SID with Prime. The agencies that are using SID with Prime for their day-to-day operations, that data will also go in the warehouse. So the data warehouse is still going to be, over the next many years, the common place where all the data is, whether it comes through SID with state, another state system, through FedRep, or from agencies directly using Prime.
In the green, I know you've had your hand up in a while. And it's what? Oh.
Go ahead.
This is Monica from Idaho. Will there be any user manuals developed or available, or some kind of DEI? For example, for SID with state, we have developed module by module procedure documents in training our staff, and they really form the base of our training.
Right. Thank you for that question. And yes, there will be. And I guess we should have made sure we said that out front, that they will be. We'll do a lot of the demos here. We'll continue with more webinars, and then we'll make sure we do that as well. Thank you for that.
Anita, Joe Carlson again. Yeah. One question I have, and hopefully I'm capturing this for the audience. There's only going to be maximum of 5 states that are pilot states. EPA is going to take care of the data migration for those states. For the rest of us that are not in a pilot, and we get to a point in time where, yes, we'd like to adopt, mm-hmm. Has there been information developed as to, is there going to be a state cost? Do we have to use an outside contractor, or can we just ask EPA to migrate?
That's a great question, Joe. Right now, I know Renee is working on that data migration. To be honest with you, I can't answer that. I'm not sure. I know that we do, that most of the states, because of the drinking water SRF and the set-asides, we had a $300 million increase in funding for the SRF. So that means folks had the increase in their set-asides, and one of the set-asides, well, 2 of the set-asides you can actually use for IT and those kind of supports, and there was a one pager out in the front. So Joe, to answer that question, it's too preliminary. I think it might be a combination of both, that the states will have to pony up some money to help us with that, as well as EPA. So we're still trying to figure out from a funding perspective and how we're going to do that.
I appreciate your openness and honesty on that question rather than giving a dodge.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. On one of the emails that had come out, there's a line that says the transition support for SID with Prime in 2019 and 2020 is an ongoing issue. At this point, the clock for EPA's 1-year support will start after the initial release version is fully tested and available. Whether EPA will provide support beyond that first year is still not clear at this point. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Because I find that worrisome. Okay, yes.
Yeah, you respond to your email. Yeah.
Thank you.
You do that.
Yeah, and Anita can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you remember the last, the road at the top, March 19, they're saying in March 2020, Sidwell State support's going to go away. Now, that's what we're saying today. Situation could change. And so that's the only, if you haven't noticed, things change all the time in DC the last couple of years. And so right now, that's again, they say 1 year from between March 19 and March 2020 to continue to support a Sidwell State. That could change. I'm not giving you a good answer, but that's why I wrote that with TBD, because most everything I try and predict in the future, I try and qualify, because my ability to predict is not very good these days.
Right, I understand. So Sidwell State support is going to go away after a year, but this is referring to transition support?
Yes, right. I get it. We don't know. I'm guessing a year, but it maybe Michael will have a different point of view at this point. So
I think the question was transition support going away. That's not going to go away.
No, transition support is not going to go away. So I think that was your question, right?
It was, because that's not what this email said.
Well, again, this is what I knew when I wrote the email 6 weeks ago. So,
okay, great.
Things change. So transition is not going to happen in a year, I guess is the point. And so,
I know, that's what I'm concerned about.
I got it.
So if transition is going to take longer than a year.
Transition is going to take longer than a year.
Support needs to be for longer than a year.
Right, but is it going to be for 2 years or 3 years? That's unknown.
Right.
So, but I think EPA's point, in the way I look at it, they're going to support it as long as they can, and that they got a whole lot of financial issues. We're still trying to figure out what the appropriations for the past September 30th are going to look like, and so when you start looking past 20 and 21, it gets really sketchy. But yeah, I think everyone realizes transition is going to take more than a year, and some support's going to be needed, and maybe I'll be a little more careful about my wording. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Any other questions? All right. Ooh, thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
All right. So next, I think we're going to bring Michael up, and Michael is going to walk through the. We're going to do governance right now, or the data quality awards.
Oh, we should do governance.
Yeah. So we're just going to quickly go over the current Sidwell Prime governance, introduce everybody to the big players that we'll probably hear from throughout the week. So I'll give it back to Anita or Michael.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. So I wanted to take this time to actually recognize all the folks that have been doing so much work on Sidwell's modernization. And it's a long list of names. So what I would like to do is after I go through this first list, if folks can stand up and actually everybody can applaud at that time. And I just want to give people, so everybody knows who's doing what and who's been doing what over the many years. So Barrett Brown from North Dakota. Yeah. Interfacing Applications Work Group Co-Chair. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? We just need to give him a hand applause right now, because that's a whole lot of work right there. And Anthony, thank you so much from ASWA. You guys have increased your efforts the last few months at facilitating sharing a bunch of solutions for all the states. So we really appreciate that. And then I want to talk about what's really the ongoing roles from the Sidwell Prime user acceptance team. I think everybody knows what Patty. She's the EPA product owner for Prime, and she's been on a halftime detail from Utah to EPA. This is going on year 2. Yes, year 2. We have Colt Smith from Utah, Maria Ridgway from Arkansas, Alaska. I'm sorry. Sorry, yeah, it's a big difference, Arkansas and Alaska, right? Chris Roy from Connecticut, Sarah Pearson from Indiana, Caitlin Murphy from New Hampshire, Lee McKenna from New Hampshire, Lynn Kie from Nevada, Jason Minich from Pennsylvania, and Jay Hugh from Region 7. So let's all y'all folks, can y'all stand up and let's everybody give them a round of applause. They are the SIDWIS Prime user acceptance team. Right. And then I want to go to like the advisory board and co-chair for SIDWIS Prime. That's Damon Gutterman from Massachusetts. Oh, he stepped. Oh, yeah. Joe, there you are, Joe from Oregon. The SIDWIS implementation work group co-chair. Rachel Cassidy from Utah. Really, Data Management Advisory Committee co-chair. Greg Smith, the monthly Prime and CMDP transition call. Daryl, where's Daryl? There you are. Right. ASWA participation, all the governance groups, plus all the logistics for ASWA, and you're the lead for this conference. So really appreciate that and all your planning and execution you've done. And Gary McElhenney from the Interface and Applications Work Group co-chair. If all you guys could stand up and everybody give them a round of applause for all the work that they have been doing. Great. And I actually want to give some special thanks to Greg Fabian. He retired back in March of this year. And his biggest thing when I came to this division probably 2.5 years ago, he said, I want to stay until Prime is done. But he retired. But that's okay. We told him that we'll keep him in the loop with everything that's happening so he can come back and celebrate, because Greg was, when the inception of all that started, Greg was there. So we applaud all his efforts, and when he's in his retirement days, as he's enjoying golf and swimming and all that good stuff. Yes. So next I want to actually have the folks from the EPA, because we have some new members in our EPA team dealing with SIDWIS. So if y'all don't mind, I know you're probably going to hate me later, but that's okay. If you can come up front so people can see who you are. So they don't always have to come to me. They can go to you. No. So you have this wonderful opportunity. You see, it's all about leadership, right? So Justin Wright, he's not here, but he started with us about a year ago. Oh, Justin's here. My bad. Justin, come on up here, son. Yeah. He started with us a year ago on a detail back in January 2018. He was from EPA's Office of Federal Activities. And Justin is leading the Prime transition support. He's also leading the Prime pilot phase planning, as well as he's leading the Prime engagement and exchange network grant program. Yeah, a lot. When we get them on detail, we know how to work them really well. So thank you, Justin. Then Eleanor, there you are. Eleanor Keith, she works for the Project Management's Office, and she is our SIDWIS Prime Data Exchange Solutions lead. Eleanor used to be prior to SIDWIS, she worked on the ETT for OECA, but she is now permanently with the Project Management Office in OW. Yay! When you can get a permanent person, yay! Y'all know how it is. And then other folks, I want, if y'all don't mind, coming up front so people can see who you are, especially because we do have a lot more members in attendance at this conference. Kristen, SIDWIS Prime CMDP Project Manager. Patty, everybody knows Patty. Come on up. Yep, come on up. Don't be shy. Yep. Renee Morris, the Prime Data Mitigation Lead in our SIDWIS Fed Data Warehouse Reporting Services and our DMAC co-chair. Brianna. In case you don't know Brianna, she is our Prime training and outreach and communications coordinator. She's our Prime testing with the UAT team, and she is also the CMDP help desk lead. A lot of folks. Trang, I think it's a lot of you know Trang, but we have new people here. Trang Lee, she's our Prime and CMDP PBA, the blanket purchase agreement core. She's also a Prime testing with the UAT team and also with SIDWIS State. Tawana Dorsey, she is not here, but she is also works on our help desk and the SIDWIS Prime help desk and our email box. And she does monthly all things SIDWIS and our information security. We have Alex Porteous. He's not here as well, but he's also probably about 2-year addition to our team. Yeah, 2-year addition to our team. Oh, they're all online. Okay, I'm giving y'all shout outs, so be happy. So he's our SIDWIS FEP reporting services, our data quality and DMAC support, and our DW maps and GIS, if any of you guys deal with that. Derek Teasley, come on down. He is our CMDP team lead doing our technical support and our CMDP transition primacy point of contact. So thank you, Derek. Will Bowman. I think folks know Will. Will is the product owner of CMDP, and he also is working the point of contact for CMDB transition. Michael Plastino, y'all know Michael. He's our he's our the infrastructure branch chief, and it's good to have Michael back. I don't know if he thinks that all the time, but when he interviewed 2.5 years ago to come back to the division, he thought he was interviewing for the state revolving fund framework, the state revolving fund program. And I said, I said to he brought him in for the third thing, and I said, we're doing a bait and switch. We're changing it. So if you want to come back to us, you got to go back to Prime. So he's like, yes, I'll do that. So thank you, Michael, for that. And Ron Bergman, he's on traveling on his way here. He's one of the associate division directors, and he's also the EPA co-chair and SITWIS advisory board. So I want to let you guys see all the people that have been behind the scenes, some in front of the scenes, making this happen, moving this forward, taking one slice at a time to make headway. So I want to give everybody a big round of applause. Okay, you can sit down now. And all the folks online, thank you so much. All right, so I think that was all I was going to talk about. Now we're going to be giving out the Data Quality Awards.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Nita, for pulling me back into Prime. It is a little painful sometimes, but it's a great project and a great community. Data quality, it's been an awesome year. It's already, usually the scores are already really high. This year has been exceptionally high. For just one example, before we call out the awards, the honorable mention criteria last year for Best Data Quality Award, we used 0.994 for the data quality matrix score. We had 4 honorable mention primacy agencies last year. This year is 14. So it's a huge improvement. And improvement not just at the top, but across the board. There's been a really big improvement of the score. So thank everybody for a big round of applause for the whole community for a great job of data quality. So we've got part of our data quality team here. Alex is not here, but Renee Morris and Brianna Napo who also have data quality roles. They're going to be handing out the awards. So first we've got the Best Data Quality Primacy Agency. And this is determined by the last quarter of the previous calendar year, which is 2014 quarter 4. And again, it's using the SIDWIS data quality matrix that's been in use the last few years with input from the DMUC. So the award with an almost perfect score of 0.9996. I think we can round that to 1. The Platinum Award goes to Louisiana. The Gold Award, also with a very impressive score, 0.9993. Again, I round that up to 1. The Gold Award goes to West Virginia. And we've got a 2-way tie for the Silver Award with a 0.9987 score. I'll announce both of the winners, and then we can do the applause. The winners are Oregon and Region 7 Primacy, our Tribal DI program. Okay, now we've got the long list of 14 honorable mentions, and to get us out in time for lunch, what I'm going to ask you to do is hold the applause until all 14 are called and come up. No break. We're not lunch yet. Sorry, I'm still on East Coast time. My watch says 11:53. Yeah. So the winners are, and please hold the applause till the end again, North Carolina. If you can come up as I call the name, and then we'll keep going through the list. Region 4, Guam, Illinois, Missouri, South Dakota, Iowa, some traffic control here. Montana, Indiana, Arkansas, Colorado, American Samoa, Nebraska, Ohio. So let's do a big round of applause for the 14 honorable mentions. Okay, we've got 3 last quicker awards. The next one is for Most Improved Data Quality Primacy Agency, and this is determined by the data quality matrix scores compared with the end of 2016 with the end of 2017. The winner with the biggest improvement of 0.167 during that period, the Platinum Award, Region 4. The Gold Award with an improvement of 0.128, West Virginia. The Silver Award with an improvement of 0.096, Region 2. And we've got 3 honorable mentions, all with a improvement of at least 0.06. And I'll read all 3, and then if you can come up and we'll applaud. Nebraska, Texas, and Hawaii. Next, we've got a single winner category, and that's the Rising Star Data Quality Award. And that goes to the primacy agency that had the biggest progress between Q3 of 2017 and Q4 of 2017. And that winner with an improvement of 0.0184, Rhode Island. All right, before I read off the last one, I did want to note that we've had some discussions leading up to the DMUC, Joe Carlson, Daryl Osterhout, Renee and I, and a few others about revisiting the criteria for the awards for future years. And with the scores being so high, do we want to continue to use the data quality matrix or do something else for data quality awards or some sort of hybrid? So I've asked Renee and Alex to work with Rachel Cassidy and the DMAC between now and September to look at, do we want to have the same criteria or revise it for next year? So that'll be happening in the next few months. So the best data quality region is determined based on the average of primacy agency scores within that region, so including the states and the tribal DI program. And the winner this year, there was several really good ones. All the regions, except for one, had an average score of 0.994. And the one region that wasn't on there wasn't too far down. It was I didn't mean region 1. I meant all the regions except for one of the regions. So I didn't mean to say region 1. Sorry. So the winner with an average score across the region of 0.995, Region 7. And one last quick data quality note on follow-up to Joe Carlson's question, and Renee, don't leave yet, because this is part of Renee's discussion tomorrow on the data migration. She's going to be doing a session tomorrow, and the breakout of EPA to state costs that Anita mentioned. Basically, the short answer is Renee's got the data quality tools, data transfer tools that make it really easy, and the state part of it is going to be addressing the data errors that show up in those tools, data errors that have to be addressed before data gets into Prime. So Renee will talk more in detail about that tomorrow. I'll turn it over to Anthony or Alan. Anything else? Yep. Okay.
So a round of applause for everybody really quick. So we are frighteningly on time, and I love that. So we're going to be back at 10:30 a.m. So get some coffee and relax for a little bit. Thank you.